So I will be giving a presentation on the history of our solar system tonight, according to Ra and Kuo Confederation. I give a presentation. This is part of another larger presentation I did a while ago, but we've since received a lot more information on the history of our solar system. So this would be a good refresher. And then this is also new to those of us who are new to the Law of One or new to the group. So sort of a brief overview. So in total, there have been 4 planets to host life in our solar system. And there is one that is currently, that has the potential to advance to all of the densities. Our sun, our solar Logos, chose the bipedal erect grade 8 vehicle to invest their density consciousness in, which means that all 4 planets that have hosted life, Venus, Maldek, Mars, and Earth, have all had some form of grade 8 that was native to their second density that eventually became the third density vehicle on their planets. And they also had opposable thumbs. There has definitely been a common theme of bellicosity and war throughout our solar system, which we will discuss. So first up, we have Venus. Venus is the second planet from the sun. It is currently a 6th density planet, but is currently inhabited by 5th density entities. So Earth isn't the only planet in our solar system at this space-time that has life. Venus still has life to this day, but it is the 5th density. The population on Venus at the end of the 3rd density was 38.5 million, and 68.5 million of those souls went on to form these social memory complex of Ra, and which means that 32 million went on to repeat their density, which I always thought was interesting, being that Venus is such a harmonious, was such a harmonious planet that not even half of the population went on to harvest positively, and that the sinkhole of indifference still remains to be the majority, the route that a majority of a 3rd density population takes. Venus is Ra's home planet and their origin, and one of the earliest planets in our solar system, if not the first to host intelligent life. Their 3rd density concluded 2.6 billion years ago, which coincided with the beginning of Earth's 2nd density. So during Ra's entire civilization, Earth was a lifeless planet pretty much, and probably was of no great interest to them, if they even looked beyond their planet. Ra says that in the physical sense, Venus was a harshly bright planet with conditions that we would consider to be difficult. Ra did share with us what they physically looked like, and this is a form that they also came to and appeared to the Egyptians too. Ra says that we were tall and somewhat delicate. Our physical body complex covering, which you call the integument, had a golden luster. So in other words, they were tall, slim, and had golden skin. They enjoyed a slightly thinner veil, which afforded them things such as using the dream state to better process catalysts and things of such. The thinner veil allowed them to enjoy that, and also was probably caused the rapid evolution. And they had successful harvests during all 3 minor harvests within their density. Their density is comprised of 3 minor 25,000-year harvests, and Ra was able to successfully bring a harvest each minor cycle. They were a more harmonious and philosophical society, and they developed the tarot. Ra says that the 3rd density experience of those of Venus dealt far more deeply and harmoniously with what you would call relationships with other selves, sexual energy transfer work, and philosophical or metaphysical research. The product of many generations of work upon what we conceive to be the archetypical mind produced the tarot, which was used by our peoples as a training aid in developing the magical personality. So pretty much Ra's 3rd density civilization revolved around love, relationships, philosophy, and sex, which I don't know about y'all, but those are my kind of people for sure. And I think it's also funny that our correlation, or what we attribute to Venus, with the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and civilizations, the attributes that they attributed, to the planet or the goddess Venus, is pretty much spot on in correlation to Ra's 3rd density civilization. So I always thought that was kind of cool. Ra tells us about an event that happened in the 2nd cycle of their 3rd density, in which 2 positive 5th density wanderers incarnated and ended up flipping their polarity. They came in as positive 5th density wanderers, but ended up flipping their polarity and graduated to the negative 4th density. And so how this happened was Ross says that from the viewpoint of wisdom, their third density society had a overabundance of love. And there was a portion of their society who felt that that over-compassion, overabundance of love was too sickening or too passive, too pitying. And so there was a portion of the population that wanted to polarize positively, but like I said, they just felt that the overabundance of compassion was not the route that they wanted to take. And so these two positive fifth density entities saw those who were still in darkness or who were still kind of neutral or a negative orientation and felt that they could incarnate and provide a more wisdom-oriented approach to seeking the creator and polarizing positively. And so they did that. But as we all know, with the nature of their density comes the veil, and upon incarnating, they forgot the original plan. And they did do the work that they intended to do. However, the results weren't what they originally intended. And so Ross says that they incarnated, one is female, the other one is male. And they both started to work, and they found each other and started working together. And soon they found about them a crowd. They had an audience. They had a group of followers that believed that the specific wisdoms and things that they had to offer could advance them towards the creator. And so what ended up happening was they fell into very service to self tendencies and actions. And Ross says that they used control over others as well as domination unto the physical death. And so Dawn asks, how could these two positive wanderers flip their polarity on a planet like Venus? And Ra tells us that because Venus was very, harmonious and very unused to slaughter, that the actions and what these two wanderers caused was so, I guess you can say, so life-changing or dramatic for the sphere that allowed them to flip their polarity so easily on Venus. Ross says if these two wanderers were on Earth, they would just be considered ruthless tyrants who started a holy war. But on a sphere like Venus, who was very much unused to bellicosity and aggression, this is what allowed these wanderers to flip polarity. After leaving their third density incarnation, the veil was lifted and they realized that they had ended up in fourth density negative, which is not what they wanted. And so they eventually retraced their steps and were able to rejoin positive time space. And they later on joined Ra's social memory complex. So Ross says that they, upon graduating to fourth density, 6.5 million souls graduated to positive fourth, and they became Ra. Ross says that they accelerated pretty quickly through the fourth density because they already entered fourth density with a great wealth of love and compassion. This ironically caused them to spend a lot more time in fifth density because they had to balance the over-compassion that they had gained in fourth density with wisdom. So they spent a lot more time. And so Ra is currently at this time space in the sixth density, and they tell us that they have 2.5 million years left in sixth density, which means that they have traversed the majority of sixth density and is almost to the graduation point of seventh density. All right, moving on. Next, we have Maldek. So Maldek was the fifth planet from the sun, and it currently exists as the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. So, growing up in school, our teachers tell us the asteroid belt was pretty much a ring of the debris from the formation of our solar system. Part of that is true, and the other part of it is the remnants or the debris of Maldek when they destroyed their planet. Ross says that the cycle started early on Maldek due to the planet being able to host first density life forms early on. So Maldek is kind of one of those overachiever planets who was like, hey, look at me, I can host life pretty early. Ross says that their society had service to self thoughts, ideas, and actions that they believed to be sincerely service to others. So their actions and a lot of what they did were service to self, but their belief structures persuaded them and caused them to believe that such actions and beliefs were service to others. And then Dawn asked if Maldek hadn't destroyed itself, would it have gone on to be negative? And Ross says that they had in common with our sphere a mixture of energies and that some of the population was positive, some negative. So if Maldek had not destroyed itself and had continued on to graduation or the third density harvest, they more than likely would have had a mixed harvest. Now the destruction of Maldek. Maldek was destroyed through the use of scientific and spiritual knowledge along with nuclear and crystal-powered weapons 705,000 years ago. And so in a recent channeling, a questioner asked Kuo, was the destruction of Maldek intentional, or was it simply just a byproduct of war? And this is what Kuo also had to say. The type of what has been described as weaponry, while we may not explore this in a technological sense, may better be viewed as an exploration and a study of the inner workings of the planet itself, and how a population upon a planet's surface may influence the very dynamic, meaningful, and living processes beneath the surface of the planet, extending down deep to its very core. This was both a technological and spiritual understanding that was gained that then allowed for the destruction of the planet itself. And the tendencies towards the suicidal notion were very much present in the inception of the destruction. So pretty much the Maldekians had studied or gained the knowledge of how intricately tied a planet and the population on a planet are tied and connected, and they used that in intentionally destroying the planet. So the destruction of Maldek was not just a byproduct of war, it was intentional, which is crazy for me to think. And so after this, and because this was a planetary-wide destruction, not a single entity escaped. And upon the destruction, the entire social complex was caught in what Ra calls a tangle or a knot of fear. Ra says some of your time passed, no one could reach them, and no beings could aid them. Ra also tells us that the peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to you as Atlantis, and that it gained much technological information and used it without the care for the preservation of their sphere. After the destruction of their planet, 600,000 years ago, the Confederation deployed a social memory complex to attempt to untie the knot of fear. Like I said, the mass planetary destruction pretty much rendered every entity unconscious, and they were caught in that tangle of fear, knot of fear for hundreds and thousands of years. Eventually, a member of the Confederation was able to reach them and start untying that knot, and they collectively regained consciousness. And so upon regaining consciousness, the Maldekians collectively were brought to the inner planes of Earth 500,000 years ago. And when they all collectively regained consciousness, they all agreed that they had to alleviate their karma somehow. And so they chose to do this, and by placing their third density consciousness in one of the races of Bigfoot that we have on this planet. Ra says that the alleviation mechanism was designed by the placement of this consciousness in second-dimensional physical chemical complexes, which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the workings of the third-density distortions of the mind complex. So pretty much to put that into human words, the Maldekians all elected to place their third-density consciousness in a second-density vehicle that wouldn't allow them to act out aggression or destruction. They were still third density conscious, but like I said, in a second density vehicle that was not conducive to acting out all of the negative actions of a third density mind. And so this all occurred 500,000 years ago, and some of them are still around in these Bigfoot bodies and dwell in our deeper underground passageways. Now, as Earth's third density approached, some of them were able to alleviate their karma, and some of them joined Earth's density at the beginning, and many of them have gone elsewhere. Now, a lot of them have reincarnated and have given an attempt at a second chance to use nuclear power responsibly. Ross says that some of those involved with the invention of the nuclear bomb, some of them were Maldekians reincarnated, and that was their second chance at using nuclear energy peacefully instead of destructively. All right, next up, we have Mars. Mars is the fourth planet from the sun, and the core vibration, it was stopped mid-third density and is currently undergoing healing. We know from the Ra contact that Mars was home to a fiery, progressive, and bellicose society, and that they had different factions and practiced different forms of government that warred against each other, which is, we see here on Earth today, and that resulted in their planet becoming inhospitable. In a recent Quo channeling, a questioner asked Quo if the destruction of Mars was gradual or if it happened instantaneously, and this is what Quo had to say. We can say that the bellicose attitudes and the intention of aggression and harm between various populations on the planet of Mars led to a scenario in which there was a gradual decline in the biosphere due to literal destruction of ecosystems. This gradual decline was exacerbated as energies escalated and weaponry and attitudes became far more destructive in nature as the desire for destruction grew. Thus, you may see a slow decline of both ecosystem and population for a matter of time that eventually concluded with a singular event that spawned a much quicker decline. That being what you experienced as a matter of months because of weaponry that disrupted a central aspect of the planetary ecosystem, being that life-giving force of water and the cycle of water. Through this disruption of the cycle of water, there was a chain of events that unfolded in which the ecosystem itself deteriorated, and the soul of the planet, as you may understand it, faded, thus resulting in a deterioration of what you would recognize as a magnetosphere, thus solidifying the lack of ability of life to again take grasp upon this planet. We reiterate that this catalyst of destruction is continuing to be processed and explored upon your own planet and within your own population. And you may draw correlations between what you witness upon your planet currently and its relationship to the planet as an ecosystem with what unfolded upon the red planet. So pretty much the destruction of Mars is gradual, and that they were destroying each other and each other's ecosystems. And then eventually they had some form of weaponry that disrupted the planet's water cycle. And Quo says within a matter of months, that pretty much wrapped up life on Mars. And after the Martians disrupted their planet's ability to host life, they were then transferred to Earth by Yahweh, which I'll get into next. All right, and next up we have Earth. Now, Earth, I could give an entire presentation all on its own, so I definitely couldn't fit everything within just, a slide or two. So I just put a few highlights on here. So Earth, as we know it, is our home and is the third planet from the sun. Earth is currently a fourth density planet, but is currently inhabited by both third density and fourth density entities. And our population is 8 billion, and our harvest at the end of the transition is to be determined. The Earth's third density concluded during the winter solstice of 2012 and has since been transitioning into fourth density. Ra tells us that Earth is comprised of 16 planetary influences who are repeating third density here, which has been the cause of the array and diversity of cultures. And this is not common. Usually a planet evolves with its original stock from second density into the third density and goes on about without any outside visitors or outside third density repeaters. But, there are many different reasons a third density planet has to repeat third density. And so 16 groups saw Earth as a fitting candidate for repeating the third densities. And this mixture of archetypal minds, because each sublogos or each solar system has a different archetypical mind. And combining all of that together, combining all of these different planetary influences has caused, like I said, an array of cultures, but it's also caused the array of difficulties and aggression and bellicosity that we've seen throughout our entire planet's history. Because we have so many different groups, so many different, like I said, archetypal minds and third density repeaters all here trying to figure it out. So when the Martians destroyed their planet's ability to host life, at around the same time, coincidentally, Earth was beginning its third density. And so Yahweh, who is a Earth guardian, had a lot of care and love for the Martians and pretty much sought permission to transfer the souls of the Martians to Earth. And they were granted that opportunity. And so what they did was they genetically altered the Great Ape body that was available for third density at that time. Because like I said, Earth's third density was just beginning. There was a Great Ape vehicle available for third density consciousness, but Yahweh looked on that and wanted to improve it. And so Quo says they did this by articulating facial features a bit more carefully, by altering the set of the body so it would be able to stand upright, and by improving the dexterity of the physical vehicle, especially in the hands, and by creating a larger capacity within the mind that came with that biological species. In essence, they created a new and improved Great Ape body, which looked a good deal like the one you are now enjoying. Now, what happened with this new and improved body is when the Martians incarnated, the differences were obvious because there were other great ape species on Earth that existed alongside the Homo sapiens. And so the Martians incarnated and they could tell that they were better than, and that gave them a better than attitude, which, as we know, is more service to self-thinking, and that allowed Orion to then enter the chat because the Martians had developed this kind of mentality. And so Yahweh and a lot of other Confederation members saw that as a mistake and felt that the Martians, their free will had been infringed. And so thus they instituted the quarantine, which pretty much keeps higher density entities from freely coming into Earth. They either have to ask the Council of Saturn for permission to come and contact us, or they have to take advantage of the random window effect that happens within the quarantine. The lifespan at the beginning of our third density, and in general, was 900 years. And this was greatly shortened because we were not processing catalysts. We were not using those 900 years effectively processing catalysts. And so our lifespans have significantly dropped from 900 years to what now is probably between 80 and 90 years. There has been various contact with the planet from the Confederation. Ross says that visitations to the planet started about 4 million years ago, but that the first Confederation contact was with those of Mu, which, for those of you who aren't familiar, Mu was a continent that predates Atlantis. They were pretty advanced spiritually, and their continent was submerged underwater, not due to any actions of their own like Atlantis, but there were just natural shifts that were happening in the earth that caused their continent to submerge. And so the Confederation was called and contacted them. The Confederation was also called to Atlantis, South America, and we all know that we're all walked amongst the Egyptians over 11,000 years ago. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Earth is currently transitioning into the fourth density. Back during the channelings, Ra gave an estimate of 100 to 700 years. We don't know where we fall in that now, but Earth is currently transitioning. All right, for honorable mention, we have Uranus. Uranus is the seventh planet from the sun, and its core vibration currently is first density. Ra tells us that the planetary entity known to you as Uranus is slowly moving through the first density and has the potential of moving through all the densities. So right now, Uranus is currently in the state of trying to wake up. And if it does, then it will progress and evolve into second density and then possibly third density. For those of us who have astronomy knowledge, we know that as the sun gets older, it expands, and so heat will be pushed more out into the outer reaches of our solar system. So it's my personal theory that here in maybe between 2 and 4 billion years from now, as our sun gets older, it'll expand and Uranus will warm up. And I personally believe that warming up will help kickstart Uranus advancing through first density. And in a matter of a few billion years, Uranus could be the next planet with third density life in our planet. And those of us on Earth will be a social memory complex by that point, and we may be of service to them as Ra is to us. Another planet that gets honorable mention is Saturn. The Council of Saturn is located here. Ra says that the planet known as Saturn has a great affinity for the infinite intelligence, and thus it has been dwelled upon in its magnetic fields of time-space by those who wish to protect your system. And so I put Confederation HQ because the Council of Saturn is based here. So it could be the headquarters of the Confederation. We're not exactly sure, but I assume some way it would be, since, like I said, the Council, who pretty much oversees all of the daily activities and everything of the Confederation, are stationed. All righty, and that is the end. So next we have 30 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions or time for discussion or anything?
That was wonderful. Wow. Great job.
Thank you.
You spent some amazing time on those screens too. Thank you for that service. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to throw out, but it'll come to me in a second. But I do, for some of you that have been toying around with the Law of One for a while, was this new information for you? Or do you have some questions regarding that? And others who are brand new in the Law of One, how do you resonate with some of this? Rudy, go ahead.
Okay. Rudy asked the question, can you say any more about the 16 representatives on Earth? Is there a list somewhere? So off the top of my head, we don't have a list of the locations of all 16 planets, but Ra has said that some of those that are included in the 16, of course, would be Mars and Maldek. And then we have those from the star system of Deneb. Their planet was unable to continue in their density because of their star. Their star, I guess, grew to a certain age, was old, and caused the planet to not be able to support their density life. So they collectively chose to come here to Earth. The Deneb star system, and their, I want to say Sirius was another one that was mentioned. There's many planets in Sirius, but there was one particular planet that they destroyed their planet through aggressiveness and came here. So those are just a few that were mentioned.
And what I also understand is there was a root stock at the very beginning of 75,000 that was, I don't think it was the 16, I thought it was something like 12, but then as time went on and there was no movement towards harvest, nobody in the first major cycle or the second major cycle, with the exception of 150 people at the end of the second major cycle, was even harvestable. So the quarantine was lifted a little bit. The Council of Saturn brought in and some other people. And also by that time, the Maldekians were able to come in greater numbers as well. So I think at the end, we do have something like 16 that are coming in. And you gotta know that Earth is, I think they said that was 1/4 of our souls are from second density. 50% are coming from the Mars group. This is at the very beginning of 75,000 years. And then 1/4 are coming from the other array of planets coming in. But we are a mixed harvest. So we've got people that are highly negative and just didn't quite make the harvest into fourth density negative. So they're here, really negative. We have people who are very positive, but didn't quite make the harvest in their planet that went to fourth density. So they're here. We have a whole bunch of wanderers here that are fourth, fifth, and sixth density that are here to help midwife this planet. And then we also have the vast majority who are unpolarized in two ways. One way is that they haven't made the choice of polarity yet. Or two is they've made the choice, but they have not, they depolarize. And so they're unpolarized enough to make the harvest. So we are a big motley crew.
That's right.
So that was a lot of information. It was really interesting. I tried to take some pictures of it just so I could, reference a little bit. So there's a lot.
If you need back to pull up a slide, I can for sure.
Yeah, no, I don't think right now. Although I did miss getting the slide of the Earth's part because I forgot to. There's a lot going on. I guess my question is, I heard you say that what happened with Mars. I think I heard you say the Earth should pay close attention to, because kind of what I heard. Maybe I misheard, but it kind of sounded like you said what happened on Mars could happen on Earth. So we should pay attention to kind of what the problems and things that is that kind of what they said?
Correct. So pretty much they said that what happened on Mars is happening on Earth. And the reason for that is a planetary population, they bring with them their biases. And so when the Martians come here, they brought with them their biases towards aggression and bellicosity. And that, which has been part of our planet's history of war and, empire and all of that. A lot of those energies stem back to Mars. And Ra says that at the very beginning of our third density, the greatest majority of the Martians incarnated in the Middle East. So a lot of what we've seen play out throughout history in the Middle East, and even what we're seeing now between Palestine and Israel, there are a lot of Martians involved in that conflict, and these energies that we're seeing played out today in 2024 go all the way back to Mars. Because Kuo tells us that sometimes entities, they get stuck in a cycle. And even after reincarnation, they just kind of get used to aggression. So a lot of those Martians have just fallen into a cycle of aggression and war, and we're seeing that still play out on our planet, as well as the whole ecosystem thing. Because Kuo says that they gradually destroyed ecosystems, and we're seeing that on our planet now. We're warring against each other and destroying ecosystems. Unfortunately, on Mars, they went too far and screwed up their water cycle. And that's what pretty much was the straw that broke the camel's back. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I've come a long way in a lot of things I've thought, although I've never been real extreme necessarily. But one of my thoughts is, I think there's a few ways that we could be destroying our planet, right? And one is a nuclear war type situation, and another is just not taking serious, I guess, right? Taking care of the planet in certain ways. But so did they talk about how us taking care of the planet would, or if so I guess I'm confused if Mars, if they destroyed it by just like what we have done with the environment and polluting and all that kind of stuff, or if that was talked about much.
Are you asking if? I'm sorry. Can you rephrase the question for me?
Yeah, I guess sorry, there's a lot going through my head. I kind of see two ways we can destroy the planet in my head. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but one is boom, a bunch of wars, nuclear war, or explosions or whatever. Then there's also the slower, maybe, where we have been, polluting slowly, messing up the atmosphere and all those kind of things. Are both of those an aspect of how we could be slowly destroying the planet?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And in Mars' case, they had kind of both. They had a gradual decline, and then they had a more of an instant decline. So both of them kind of working together to destroy Mars.
And the main thing that happens, whether it's through a war or a nuclear event, or just through industrial-induced climate change, is that we, screw up our atmosphere. The atmosphere, probably there's multiple levels of atmosphere when it comes to densities, but just on a physical level, we have an oxygen carbon cycle, and it's been what's created a utopia on this planet on some level. And as we break that cycle, we can basically suffocate ourselves. It can happen slowly or it can happen quick. We don't know. It's happening, actually. We're destroying the vegetative skin of the planet, and out of the vegetative skin of the planet, the atmosphere came and biological life came, and all these entities were able to take root here.
Exactly. It's interesting, Matt and Peter, you bring that up because Ra also tells us that there are a lot of the people on Earth currently who have a great care for the planet. A lot of them destroyed their planets in their previous third density. So a lot of the people we see, who are hug trees or who are green thumbs, who just really love, or advocate for the preservation of our planet, a lot of them destroyed their planets previously, but have since alleviated that karma, have balanced and learned their lesson. And so now one of their alleviation mechanisms is caring for their current third density home, which is Earth. So that's also something that's very interesting. A lot of these people that we see fighting for, climate change and fighting for the care of our planet, they've learned their lesson because they destroyed their third density planets.
Right. Very interesting. I'd like to make some observation, DeMarcus.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what this is from these channeled entities is really an origin story.
Right.
For life on the planet. And it's an origin story that's more modern that came in the, what years was this channeled?
The original Raw Contact, 81 to 85.
Okay. So it's an origin story channeled in the West in English in a modern context. So that's interesting to me. And, but also makes me think about the other origin stories that are out there historically, that different cultures have brought in. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but it just makes me think about that. And you can have, collective origin stories, like where the planet came from, where your nation came from, where your people came from. And I think it's something that you discover, there's more to unfold on it. it's hard to get the whole story at once. If you go and look at the ancient Indian scripture, which is some of the most ancient, we could say channeled scripture because it's cognized, through subjective consciousness, they have all types of stories about different types of beings that, that were, have influenced the creation. But obviously they were communicated in a different time and space, in a different language. But there must be some type of coordination between all this.
Well,
Right.
it could be, and this is, again, grain of salt, but it could be that what we're getting with Ra, this would be my own bias, by the way, which is possibly not correct at all. But my own bias would be that the raw material would be the unveiled version, say, of the historical march and evolutionary history of the solar system. And we see the different cultures on Earth intuiting parts of this. So for me, like whenever I have the kind of the larger puzzle piece that Ra gives us, and then I see the different cultural pieces, for me, the way my mind works is that I can see how it would fit here. This one fits here and this one fits here, and it creates a great mosaic. But I don't see it in contradiction to what Law of One says. I see it sort of fleshing out the larger outline that the material seems to give. That's one way I look at it. But I'm free to be wrong. And the most important thing, of course, is what Ra says, and that there is a nature of spiritual evolution, writ large, solar system, or writ small in our own personal life. And that's what we have to glean from, I think. The cycle of bellicosity.
I think that's the theme. That is the universal theme. It's a perennial knowledge.
Yeah.
And for the most part, if you look at origin stories, they talk about, a progression of evolution. They talk about cycles of destruction and then, one step backwards, two step forward. So there's also cyclical aspects that are there.
Yep.
That are in, in the origin stories of the Vedas, the cyclical cycles of evolution on the planet, they call them yugas, are mind-boggling. They're geological in nature. Were souls really here? Maybe these are the souls that were here. They came from other dimensions, because it doesn't seem like, what we know from science and anthropology, that we had Homo sapiens going back as far as some of these yugas go. So this stuff may go back to Mars or Venus, and into those dimensions of time and space.
Yeah.
And also, DeMarcus is right. The qualities of Mars and Venus are the qualities that are in, the history of astrology in the West and in the East both. That's a universality to it.
And we're also discovering, aren't we, science right now, we're discovering that there was water on Mars, that there was water on Venus, and that science is corroborating a basic timeline that seems to be in the Law of One, of when Venus would have lost the water, which would have been right at the end of Ra's third density, the 2.8 billion years, and that when Mars lost the water and all of that would have been corroborated in the Law of One too. So that's also fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
But Earth is a third density repeater psychology, that the psychology that we have, this ensconcing ourselves in this bellicosity, is the great issue that we have. But it's also the great opportunity for something new that's never been seen before, maybe in something new, coming through, a new way to unite, and who knows what's going to happen, but it's also a beautiful opportunity for something new to happen.
Oh, yes. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts?
I was going to ask a question, but I saw Barbara had unmuted and was going to try to say something earlier. And I was curious if you.
No, go ahead. I'm still processing my stuff.
Well, I just have a lot of questions, so it's hard to grasp some of this, but in general, it seems like Earth has a stronger veil, right? So I'm just curious, is there an overall, and maybe you said I just missed it, but like it seemed like Venus and Mars, at least maybe they didn't say it, but there was one population that was there, and Earth has so many more people coming, or people groups or whatever. But yet it seems like, I mean, except for Mars blowing it up, I guess we have had a hard time. Like, I think I remember reading somewhere that Earth has not harvested hardly anybody in the first 2 major cycles. And anyway, I don't know if it's just interesting to see. So they talk about the reason why Earth is just so different and how the different populations and everyone's coming here and everything.
So they don't give a reason as to why these 16 populations saw Earth as a great candidate. They just tell us that they did, and that they chose to, when a population needs to repeat their density, then they look at other third density planets that are just beginning third density. And so I guess coincidentally, Earth's third density aligned with a lot of ending third densities. And so, like I said, we're not giving the reason why they chose Earth, but we just know that they did choose Earth and came here. And in terms of the veiling, Venus was the only planet that enjoyed a slightly thinner veil. We know that here on Earth, Mars, and Maldek, we all experienced pretty thick veil.
You know, the way I look at this a little bit is that, you know, we can really get caught up in the drama of, you know, our solar system and all the various types of personalities and archetypes and layers of evolution. And it's a little overwhelming sometimes. And, you know, but, you know, if you look at the history of Rome, you look at the history of the South American cultures, it's a little overwhelming too. They, you know, all different types of cultures crash into each other, reform, take revenge, evolve, et cetera, et cetera. And probably when you think about it, everything's going as it should go. You know, I mean, we're trying to piece it together from our own consciousness and from what, you know, the raw channeling and, you know, these people have been able to gather. But this is probably an evolving process like any ecosystem, you know, a forest or a jungle or, and our, you know, our solar system within our space, within this galaxy is doing what it's supposed to do. And probably every, you know, on an infinite level, we don't like to think about infinity. You can only, you know, it's overwhelming. But, you know, probably there's a, you know, this is happening over and over again forever. And there's qualities of Mars and Venus and Uranus and bellicosity and this and that everywhere. It's just like, you know, these are the elements of sentient life, just like you have the elements of material life.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I agree. What I would just wonder about from your statement there, maybe a nuance, is that there does seem to be a trajectory. And so where I would not see as the entire universe, say, having the same kind of thing, and this is part of sentient life, that there seems to be just this massive macro progression. There's a telos here of greater and greater complexities that have an arc. There's a movement of having having wholeness and unity, which is always and everywhere true, being made manifest, and then from that area discovering ways to create wholeness in an actualized form. And that progression keeps moving so that, as Ra says, the creator is a creature that learns upon a macro scale. And learning would suggest a progression, in that all of the cosmic laws would not support a kind of cosmic eddies that cycles that have no arc and movement, but rather more spirals, because the creator itself, in and through and as every entity and the relationships between entities, the creator itself is arcing into greater and greater complexity. So that's what I would say, is that sure, there's lots of bellicosity and things like this, but there's always going to be a resolution. Love wins. Unity is the nature. So there's nothing but unity come to incarnation, and then incarnation expressing unity, and then choosing to become one. That's the arc that seems to be universal.
I agree with you. Yeah. That was the point I was making, that this play is happening over and over again in an infinite way.
Yeah.
And then you have the idea of the cycle of, you arc up, spiral up, spiral up, spiral up, and then it collapses into wholeness, pure simplicity. And then it starts all over again. And, you can look at the idea of the singularity of the void, and then the Big Bang comes out of it. And then at some point collapse back into the void. And that's, the hum of the universe, Om.
Yeah.
The vibration, it's the hum of the universe. Om represents the infinite dynamism of silence, of expressing, collapsing, expressing, collapsing, experiencing, silencing, experiencing, silencing.
Yeah, Ross says that. It's like a great heartbeat.
Yeah. And so, but it's fun. It's our job, and we're here for the show, and to figure out our origin, see where we came from, see where we're going, and to have as much self-awareness in this process as we can.
Absolutely. Barbara, did you have a question?
No, not really. I mean, I was just, when we talked about the water system, I was thinking my dad would have been 100 years old if he had lived this next month. And I was just thinking about something he said to me many, many years ago, because he was in Air Force and fighter pilot and whatnot, and part of the intelligence community. He just had a really colorful life. And he shared with, we think about ways to destroy this planet or a certain population with either, like we do today traditionally, with the tanks and the missiles and the bombs and whatever. But he did mention the water system to me. And for some reason that stuck in my mind, what he said about could happen there. The other thing I was just relating to a little bit, only because I participated in a Bible study, and we're looking at Genesis right now and kind of moving through the Bible. And I was thinking about, okay, and it's just, trying to tie things that were shared here today in terms of creation with everything. I'm just sharing my thoughts. I'm not coming to a particular point, but, and then I was thinking about, you were talking the origin stories, and my mind went off to say, well, I don't know. I haven't studied any of those. And I said, but I wonder if there's still that some sort of commonality that feeds through all of them that I seem to see appear. And I don't know that. Maybe Doug, you do, but a little more broadly read than I am. But so just more questions or more, it was just very thought provoking for me.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite correlation is in Genesis, where God says, "Let us make man in our image." That ties directly to Yahweh genetically cloning and altering the vehicle for the incoming Martians.
Yeah.
I'd also say that all of this drama, this cosmic drama, as we've pointed out here, is found every single day in our life. And there's a little catalyst every single day. You'd think we'd get the point. Ross said a million times, it's how do you use the catalysts efficiently that come to you so that we can choose what to do with them. And then if we're choosing the positive path, to allow to see them a 360 view, and then to do some form of loving action, and set and boundaries. And that could be the loving action, is to set healthy boundaries. Thankfully, it seems like psychology is saying this, good spiritual direction is saying this, different channeled sources are saying this. So we are getting it in all different kinds of perspectives now. So whatever we talked about tonight, and DeMarcus hit a home run as usual in this presentation, is a huge macro view of what is very true in every single day in our life. And so we can be awed and in wonder about the history and UFOs and aliens. But the truth is that it's not that hard to see the cosmic drama playing out if you just want to open the eyes and see what happens when you drive on the highway. go to Walmart. Yeah.
Exactly. Just on to that, a lot of people who did destroy their third densities, like I mentioned earlier, are still trying to reconcile or alleviate and balance that out. So we definitely, like I said, still see that being played out, and people are still trying to deal with that as daily catalysts.
Amen. That's right.
Any last thoughts or questions or anything before we wrap up?
Really great. A lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
You're a great teacher, DeMarcus.
Thank you all.
Do you want me to find somebody to close it down, or did you have a prayer you wanted to do?
I'll close it. It's been a while. All right. If everyone could please close their eyes and just take a minute to clear the mind and connect with the Creator. Infinite Creator, we thank you for this night. We thank you for the opportunity to gather and to share in your love and your light. We thank you for the opportunity to fulfill your original purpose and mission, which was to learn and to experience the self, as self teaches self and self learns from self. We thank you for the opportunity to learn from one another and to discuss these things and to grow spiritually, collectively. We thank you for all that you've done, what you're doing, and what you will do. And if everyone could repeat after me, I am the infinite creator,
The infinite creator.
manifested into flesh.
Manifested into flesh.
I am
I am
infinity,
I am infinity,
experiencing itself.
experiencing itself. Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Brother DeMarcus. Hopefully everybody can come next Tuesday. We'll be doing a Law of One session. God bless everybody. Thank you.
Thanks to Marcus. Good job.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Yes. Good night.